Hello, it's Sue Stiles with Maximized Results Business Consulting and host of Hindsight's 2020. And I'm really excited to welcome Patricia Morgan today to the episode. She has a master's degree in clinical psychology and for over 30 years has been a certified Canadian counselor. Lots of wisdom there. She also is a professional speaker on the subject of resilience and has authored many books. And I'm really pleased to welcome you here today. Thank you, Patricia, for sharing your wisdom with us.
My pleasure.
So as I've gone through, I sort of have the same kinds of questions that I'm asking all kinds of different people. And the first one I want to start out with, let's get right into it, is when we're talking about business, what are some of the best ways that you've experienced getting clients or seeing other professionals build their business?
Right. Well, the very first for me is word of mouth. And how do you get word of mouth? You get word of mouth by going beyond with your service, no matter what it is, a little extra on top. As a professional speaker, one of the features that I offer to my clients when I agree to do an event or a conference is I will make a little video saying how excited how excited I am to come to their event, and sort of a little summary of what I'm going to be talking about. And the client really appreciates that little extra. And then, of course, on the platform, doing a really good job at interfacing with the audience adds that extra little icing to the cake. Word of mouth is number one. Second, I would say, is have a presence on social media. Over and over again, I hear people saying, well, social media does not work. Mm-hmm. Well, if you are not present on social media, that will work against you. Even if you don't have a whole lot of followers, one of the pieces that happens these days, one of the actions that people take in this era of 2019 is, as soon as I meet somebody or I hear about somebody, what do? I Google them. If I'm on Facebook, I go there and take a look whether I'm going to be a friend with them. I might look at their LinkedIn profile. And if I don't find anything on the internet that indicates that they're functioning, I go, I don't think they're in business.
Yeah, do they really have a business? Now, this is interesting because you're over 50. And in my experience, a lot of clients I work with over 50 really don't want to be on social media. How come you want to, or did you have to change your mindset around to, I've got to be there? Have you always enjoyed it? Did it come easily for you?
Being social comes easily for me. I imagine that for extroverts, those people that have the extroverted preference in their personality, it's probably easier. I like to be connected in a lot of different ways. The social media phenomena can put us at risk of ending up actually feeling lonely because we're not doing actual connection. However, it is a tool that we can use to connect with one another and expand our reach.
Yeah.
I love the creativity of what's available on the internet. I love playing with it. I have videos that I've made, they're called GIFs, that I can put on when it's somebody's birthday. People repeatedly say to me, wow, you're still active at your age. Now, Sue, you haven't asked me my age.
Oh, what's your age, Patricia?
I am turning 73 years of age in 4 months in December.
Fantastic. Yes. And so you're saying people are finding that you're active on social media, so they think that you're still active in your business.
Yeah. So no one comes to me and says, oh, are you still speaking? Are you still writing? Are you still providing mentoring to emerging professional speakers? Are you still providing counseling? No one asks me. Well, the counseling maybe, because that I keep more private for confidentiality reasons. But the other activities, oh yes, people know typically that I am still active. So I am at front of mind when somebody says, who do you know who might provide some support around mentoring? Who do you know who can talk about personal resilience?
And you're there. And you were telling me you actually went the next step and did some Facebook ads for an event. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I received a contract with Grand Prairie Community College to do a one-day workshop called, let me just see if I can remember, Resilience Building Tools to Boost Those You Lead.
Thanks.
I noticed that the college could use a little bit of help in promoting and advertising. I spent $12 on a Facebook ad, and I attracted 2 extra participants at that all-day workshop. And it wasn't cheap. It was close to $200 for the day. So I brought in some money for myself and for the college and the game. The meeting planner was well pleased that I had taken the initiative. I didn't ask permission, I just did it. When you're doing a good deed, you don't need to ask permission. If you're going to pay for somebody's dessert at a restaurant, which I sometimes have done just for the fun of it, that family over there is so a delightful mom and dad. Would you please take this $20 and say to them somebody left them dessert? When you're interfacing with a client, if you've got some kind of idea that you absolutely know is extra and they're going to appreciate it, don't ask permission, just do it and give them a pleasant surprise.
Nice, nice. And this thing, I mean, I hear from people all the time, oh, social media doesn't work. It doesn't matter. You know, it's just all made up. And I just was talking to a lady last week. They put targeted Facebook ads out for property they had for sale. And sure, you're throwing it out there. It's not a guaranteed sale, but actually the person who bought the condo saw the ad on Facebook. So it is relevant. It is worthwhile. Good for you for being on there. Tell me, in your opinion, what are some of the worst things or the worst ways that you see people trying to get business?
Well, I've done it myself, paying money for inappropriate, unestablished, there's no proof that certain arenas will bring you the attention you want. So I have paid to be in books. I have paid for advertisements to be in compilations that are supposed to go to thousands of people. And they've not been fruitful at all. Now, having said that, I did pay for the Facebook advertisement, but it was $12. I'm talking about hundreds of dollars, and I understand some people pay thousands of dollars to be in books. I actually saw one where it was filled with just advertisements, and people had paid about $1,000 to be in a book full of pure advertisements. And I've been gifted with this publication a number of times. I'm not interested in sitting down and leisurely reading a book of advertisements. I want value. I want to read something that's going to be helpful to me. I recommend that you see about publishing, and there's many ways to publish now. You can write your own blogs. You can be a guest blogger. If you can get into a magazine as a guest writer, that provides you with a lot of not only credibility, but a bigger audience that will trust you because you've been giving value. So for about 13 years, I was a writer for Calgary's Child magazine. And you get a little bio at the end and your contact information. So that's, I'd be wary before I spend too much money, including being in a compilation of a book. Years ago, I paid money to have a chapter in one book. Then several months later, I was at a conference where there were 5 of us that had our chapter in that book. And that felt absolutely ridiculous to be in competition with my colleagues, all trying to sell this same book. For the same amount of money, years later, I started publishing microbooks. And they're all mine. They're my little babies. And gives me much more credibility, and they're actually a lot easier to sell.
What a great idea. Anybody can do this in any industry. You know, you have that experience and wisdom you're sharing with your clients all the time. In real estate, we have, you know, buyers and sellers guides. And I'm always saying, don't use a generic one that the brokerage did for you. Create what that value is out of yourself, and yes, become the expert. But good point on wasting money on advertising. That doesn't work. Now, let's look back over your life a little bit. And we've had a bit of a chat, and I really want to be honest here. You know, we're not here to just blow what's that saying? Blow wind up your kilt. But when you look back, Patricia, what would you say if you had something to say? This was not a good effect over my life. This was one of the worst experiences. What was something that you learned of that you could share with us?
Well, I have two big regrets. Well, regrets, I'll just give a definition of regrets, different than guilt. Regret is a behavior action that you perceive as it violates your own values and cause pain to either yourself or others, where shaming is often a very different beast. So I have a couple regrets, and the two main ones is not listening to a friend really well. I was all self-absorbed with myself, and I ruined a friendship that was very important to me in my 20s. It was a really painful lesson. It still sticks with me. And I learned to listen quite well. Actually, some people say exquisitely, as a therapist. I wasn't a therapist at that time. The second biggest regret that I have is a journey with a daughter who had disabilities that were undiagnosed, and I gave credence, I gave power to so-called experts and did not listen to my own expert heart, my own expert experience, my own expert knowing of my daughter, that she was not doing these behaviors intentionally. I listened to experts for years and years, and as it turned out, when she turned 40, which was a long journey, we finally got an explanation for her disabilities. So she and I can now laugh about it, and she's become a bit of a poster girl for fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. I'm very proud of her. She's got a part-time job at Toys R Us, but for years and years, she went through the cracks, getting the appropriate support she needed. She and I use a line from Maya Angelou that we can laugh at and celebrate, and it's when you know better, you do better.
Wow.
And sometimes that knowing better to do better has got nothing to do with the external world and its messages to us. I think we need to take into consideration other people's messages, and in the end, know your truth, know your own truth. Sometimes I like to tell this quick story to put it in balance. Somebody tells you you are a horse, shrug your shoulders. If a second person tells you you're looking and acting like a horse, you might want to give it some consideration. If 3 or more people tell you you're looking and acting like a horse, maybe it's time to look into the price of saddles. And in the end, you decide whether you're going to wear the saddle or not, or whether you're going to take another road. So it's a dance. Life is a dance.
Yeah.
I think it's important to find people that you trust. Doubting self can be useful, but also knowing your truth can be useful. So there's something that happens, a ring of truth, when somebody is really truly listening, and you get this reflection back, and inside there's this, that feels like truth.
Yeah, and that's not always from the so-called experts. It might be from those who are surrounding you or from your own heart. So you're saying, you know, you need to weigh all of those things, and you don't just listen to one person carte blanche.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, I still fall in the pit now and then of doubting myself and believing somebody else's perspective of me. Hopefully, compassionate, grounded experts come from a tentative, wondering place and don't make grand statements. When we're insecure, we tend to lean towards those people that speak as if they are God themselves, declaring down the truth to us. Those kinds of so-called professionals are scary. Yeah.
Now, what if you're a parent? Well, what parent doesn't have regrets looking backwards? Or, you know, if you want to make sure your children are okay, you're saying your daughter at 40, you had a proper diagnosis. These things can go on for years. Would you have any words of advice to parents? What can we do, if anything, to restore, rebuild, help the esteem of our children?
At the same time that we are doing the best that we can, and when we know better, we do better, I see in my counseling practice over and over again adults who have a core belief that is tripping them up, that is a negative Nelly in their head, that's telling them untruths, negative ideas about who they are, whether it's stupid, lazy, crazy, not deserving, helpless, powerless. If only the parents would sit down and say, that time or those times I called you stupid, that was about me. Did you know, darling, that I didn't get out of grade 8, that I ran away and joined the army? Now that's a quick story about my own father. He would have saved me hours of therapy trying to figure out why I failed grade 7 and dropped out of high school believing I was stupid. Every mistake I made, I heard this little voice, I'm stupid. And it was a generational trauma that he had passed down to me.
But how could you have known that as a young person?
Yeah. Well, when you're little and you look up at the adults when they speak and say, "You stupid female should just shut your mouth," that feels like a God speaking. That feels like the truth is being spoken and becomes in one's unconscious. So it became unconscious for me, and I was living it out in many different ways and took that unconscious truth and proved it, you know, through my own lens. I see the power of parents owning their own trauma, their own weaknesses, their own moments where they violated their own values of integrity, being in integrity with themselves, and dumping their slop on their children. And it happens. I mean, I've done it to my own kids in times where I was vulnerable.
So can a parent at any age, should they ask their child, you know, is there anything that's bothering you? Or can they just say, you know, I was thinking of something and I want to apologize, or how does that happen?
Well, there's two ways to do it. One is, especially when they're younger, you wait till there's an opening. For example, I did some shoplifting. One time I switched actually the labels. We were quite poor and I wanted one blouse and it was $3 more than another blouse. And I switched the labels. I got caught. Oh. My one and only attempt. I'm not a very good liar, and I couldn't even pull that off. I'm not going to tell my kids when they're 3, 4, 5, 10, 11, 14 that I shoplifted. I'm not going to give them that idea. However, there may be a point where impulse caught them. And I didn't have this happen, but I'm just using this as an example. if one of my kids had shoplifted, that would have been the time where I would have said, this is not going to ruin you as a person. You made a mistake. You'll rectify it. I too made that mistake. To take away the shame and the blame. So that's one area. Another is, I think, at a certain point when our children become adults, again, trust your own truth. Maybe a time where you say, I want to tell you about my story in case any of this tripped you up. And so I asked one Mother's Day for my children when they were young adults, in their young 20s, if they would listen to my story of trauma and experiences I had, why I had troubles believing I was an intelligent woman. And the reason I did that is because our core beliefs creep out of us. I see this over and over again in counseling. Either we push our children often unconsciously into a direction that we were in, or we're terrified of it at the other end. I worked a lot with victims of sexual abuse, and these women become, and I worked with a man as well, they get so terrified about any sexualized behavior that it's, oh, you're acting like a slut, you can't go out, I'm going to ground you, no, you can't date till you're 25. They go that way. Or they become very lackadaisical and don't have the conversations about sex. They let loose with their own sexual provocation, and their kids are kind of living in this sort of sexual soup. And until they become aware, they're not in a place of choice. This is what awareness does for us. When we bring up our past trauma or our core beliefs, it rises it to the surface. So then we're at a point of choosing rather than being on automatic pilot.
I think that's a gift, to give the children. In fact, just last night I had two of the girls were over. We were making up some supper, and the youngest child was saying, now, why did you guys get divorced again in my first marriage? And here, we're all adults, and I feel like I've talked about it a million times, but as the youngest child, she did not hear, she didn't hear it over and over. She didn't hear different sides. And she was like, oh, isn't that interesting? And so just the act of being open and saying, did you need to hear about that? Oh, let's have a conversation. I didn't think that would be of interest. We put those things behind us, and how interesting that it was still a conversation that she enjoyed having.
Right. And there may be different times and different points where our children are behaving in ways that they need to hear another story, or the story told in a different context, in a different way, because they end up getting these unconscious messages. So I'll tell you about the story of it. Was a video tape I watched during a training. There was a man about 40 years of age who was homeless, disheveled, in really bad shape. A team of therapists took interest in this man and located his mother, brought his mother to the counseling situation, and asked her to tell the story of being pregnant with him and giving birth to him. And for the first time in this 40-year-old man's life, he heard the story of how his mother was gang raped and became pregnant. And she wept as she told about how difficult it was for her to change his diaper, to see his sexual parts, that she had flashbacks. And as he grew older and older, she would turn her head away. She wouldn't look at him. And he made a core belief decision that he was unlovable and undeserving. I mean, what was he supposed to do with this behavior with no context? And both mother and son wept their heads off. The truth rings with truth.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
I can't even watch that. So that.
Oh,
That's
well, the video went on and showed the man a couple months later, clean shaven, dressed, articulate, and they were helping him find
wow.
a career path. Uh, we have incredible power over our children. Holocaust survivors, it's fairly well known that many of their children, even their grandchildren, are still processing some of the leakage. Some of them have become hoarders. Some of them walk around with fear, right? Even though they may be in Canada in a very safe environment.
Yes.
So,
What's
yeah,
going on inside? Yeah.
I interviewed my dad later in life, thank heavens, a couple years before he died, because I wanted to understand some of the dynamics of him, and it helped me to understand that he was doing the best he could, even though he was verbally abusive, physically abusive, sexually abusive. I won't say he sexually assaulted me, but he made comments about being a female. So some sexual inappropriate comments. So those permeate in us. But once I started to understand his past, I realized he only passed a fraction of his pain and moods onto me, and I made a decision in my head that was his demonstration of love, that he didn't pass as much. I mean, I never heard from his mouth ever that he loved me, but I did at one point, about a year before he died, was able to look at him and say, "Dad, I really feel loved." And he stood in front of me and wept and shooed me away because it was so embarrassing for him.
Wow.
Yeah. So he could only give what he could give.
Yeah.
So if you can give to your children the gift of understanding of patterns, and we often die with these patterns, that we would give a gift to our kids. If we could say, this didn't begin with you, and it did not begin with me, and it did not begin with my father.
There's a history there. Yeah.
There's a history. It sometimes looks a little different, but these core beliefs get passed on.
Okay. Let's move our vision forward, because I want to know what's on your mind now and how you're taking yourself forward, almost reinventing yourself, reinventing a business at 69 years old. This is not something we hear about very often. Usually you're sitting on the couch playing cards and, whatever someone defaults to. Tell me about your new, lease on life, or how you created something at the age of 69. Is there hope for people out there who, after retirement, don't feel like they want to just give up?
Right. Well, when people say to me, "Are you retired?" I say, "No, I'm not tired the least. I'm not tired. I'm just not." I'm loving life. What freedom we have. We turn 65 in Canada, and we get this check dumped in our account, and freedom can open up. I have a new definition of life purpose, and it is simply this: know your gifts and give what you can. Trick is to know your gifts. If you haven't figured out your gifts yet, Google Martin Seligman via strengths, and you take an inventory and your strengths pop up, and hopefully it just affirms what you had an intuition that you had all the time. I kind of missed turning a senior, 65, 64, 67, and then 69 hit, and I started having every month a health issue. I was getting really frustrated with these health issues, and I one day woke up and said, "You know what? I'm going to declare I'm a spunky senior." That's all I can do. Sometimes I just need to pay attention to our positive, affirming thoughts. My husband and I talked him into it, threw a spunky senior 70th birthday party. We had over 160 guests, and we just had silly, fun activities. Interestingly, here at 72 and a half plus, I haven't been ill since. Isn't that interesting?
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, sometimes declaring to the world, this is how I'm going to be, and fun was part of it. I consider my work meaningful fun. It's an option for me. It's a choice as a senior. So here I am this year. I'm a TEDx speaker coach. I love the role. It's my second year at it. This year I was a speaker coach for the journalist Barb Higgins, who's now talking about post-traumatic stress disorder, particularly for journalists and other people that have to do with the media, watching those gruesome images over and over again, and the esteemed Canadian architect, Indigenous architect, Mr. Douglas Cardinal. So what an honor.
Wow.
Yes. Also, when being interviewed by the TEDx committee, the young men that were interviewing me asked me some question, which I kind of flubbed. I forget what I said, something kind of silly, or maybe my hearing with my hearing aids wasn't working properly. I don't know what was going on. I just looked at them, I said, oh, don't mind me, I'm getting over getting older. And then all three of us laughed, and I said, hang on a minute, I'm going to write that down. Get over getting older. And that's become a talk that I've been doing at senior conferences, and the subtitle is Tips on Resilient Aging. So there I've got another little program in addition to my other programs on resilience, dealing with change, how to manage your stress, how to be in resilient teams, how to be in resilient relationships, long-term relationships. And by the way, this month I am married 51 years.
Oh my goodness.
I know, and we still do it almost every night of the week, Sue.
What?
Yeah, almost every day, almost on Monday, almost on Tuesday, almost on Wednesday.
I didn't know where this was going, Patricia.
Well, I just had to put in that joke, right? I just had to weave that in.
Okay, let's listen. You have over 30 years of talking to people and seeing relationships. So I don't want to let you go before I ask, is there something you could tell most people, hey, most people, this is tripping you up, or if you could do this, this would really help when it comes to relationships. 50 years of personal experience, plus your professional experience. What would be your relationship advice?
Pay attention to the 3 C's. Are you providing adequate care, cherishing? Are you committed and letting your partner know regularly, I'm so glad I'm with you? And third, are you repairing, working on your communication? So care, share, commitment, and communication. Add values, know your mutual values and build on them. And I would add a dose of humor. I'll tell you the story about first time my husband said the F word, F you, Patricia, and I wept my head off. I thought our marriage was over. Oh gosh, how can he speak to me like that?
Yeah.
Well, fast forward 2 or 3 years, and the word came out of his mouth again. Well, the phrase, F you, Patricia. I just looked at him and said, when, honey?
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's amazing.
Yes.
Did he laugh then?
Somebody has to stay up grown up. That's what
fun.
I do. I do a fair bit of couple counseling, and that's what I see is, do people get triggered?
Yeah.
They're stepping on one another's toes in the partnership dance.
Yeah.
And if somebody can stay an adult, either saying what's going on with you with loving compassion, or staying an adult and has this little playful side come out, and you can have a little laugh and then have the discussion, what's going on with you? We're here to either lift one another up when the tough times are coming, or sometimes just gently pulling down when we're letting some arrogance get in the way. A partner has got your back. It's wonderful to have a soft shoulder to rest on and a hand that holds your back when you're feeling weak. That's the kind of partnership that I like being in. My husband and I have been almost 30 times, it's somewhere between 27, 28 times to the Rocky Mountain Couples Retreat. I highly recommend it. It's being in a room full of committed couples for a weekend retreat, doing exercises that enhance your relationship, and a lovely dinner and dance to
Oh
keep it
my
off.
goodness. How interesting. I'm just thinking as you're saying that, what you're a certified clinical counselor, you've been going through your own therapy all these years, you're married for a long time, and you're still wanting to go to a couples retreat and build your relationship. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, let's leave people with that. And I just want to mention, if anyone wants more resilience, you've got a lot of information, those books of value on your website, Solutions for Resilience. Is it .ca? And .com. And so thank you so much for being here today. That was so interesting. We laughed, we cried, we find out a few too much about your sexual relationship, and we have fun talking about it. And so thank you for sharing your hindsight. I really appreciate that. And I hope the rest of you will tune in for my other episodes on Hindsight's 2020, the wisdom when you can look back. Thanks very much, Patricia. Thanks.
My pleasure.
Rest of you. And that's a wrap for today.